During his career, John Kasich has traveled a winding path when it comes to guns. In 1994, the then congressman voted to ban assault weapons. That got him an F rating from the NRA. As governor, he has signed into law several measures that loosen gun laws, including ones that allow people to carry hidden guns in bars and in daycare centers. His NRA rating jumped to an A. But after massacres in Las Vegas and now Florida, Kasich has evolved again. For the first time as governor, Kasich has announced proposals to tighten gun laws in Ohio. The plan, developed by a bipartisan committee he formed, calls for tightening the state's background check system. It would make it tougher for those who commit domestic violence to get a gun. It would toughen the ban on straw man or third-party sales to people legally barred from owning a gun. It would ban armor-piercing bullets. It would ban bump stocks. And the most controversial item, it would change state law to allow police to confiscate the guns of people deemed at risk for committing violence.
I'm very hopeful that this is a package that is reasonable, that will improve gun safety, that doesn't represent all the hopes and ideas of everybody, but that's not what it's about. You have to be able to celebrate those things that you can come together on that can be done, that can be enacted.
Julie Carr Smith, a couple of weeks ago, John Kasich questioned why anyone would need a, quote, God darn AR-15. This plan does not go that far. Did he want to and couldn't?
I think he personally wants to, and I think he wants to do more than is in this package. But this package, as he said, that's not what this is about. This is about, I think, him trying to show Ohio and use Ohio's bellwether status to sort of send a national message on what could be agreed upon in a bipartisan civil type government that he would like to envision. Terry,
he's in a tough spot. He doesn't want to anger the NRA. Republican lawmakers at the State House are certainly not going to anger the NRA. Is this the best he can do?
Maybe yes and no. I mean, part of it, I think this is in many ways more of a national issue, and clearly at the national level it's pretty incomplete. If you looked at the meeting the president had with Democrats and Republicans, he said some things that made some people happy. Supposedly he's maybe backed off some things. The other part of this piece is obviously governors can propose, but it takes both the House and Senate to pass things. And Ohio is a very diverse state, and we see it even in the Democrat primary, where you've got Kucinich and Cordray, two top candidates, very different in their views on guns. So it's part of the discussion, but I wouldn't hold my breath in the next week or two expecting something passed.
Jackie, what are the chances? What's the early reaction from leaders on the House?
Well, we didn't get an immediate full-throated endorsement, which we do get from legislative leaders on some things that the governor rolls out. The Senate and the House leaders have said that they're willing to, look at various proposals. They've said some things that they don't want to consider, banning certain types of guns, raising the age that you can purchase guns. But they are interested, especially in the red flag restraining order idea. A lot of 4 out of the 6 proposals are actually mirroring federal law. So there are things that are already illegal, but local law enforcement can't do anything about them, and the feds have limited resources, and they're not going to go after each of these cases as well.
Yeah, the only thing that was new here is that red flag thing. These laws are already on the books. The feds can enforce them, and they're just trying to match Ohio law to the feds. But the red flag one, where you can have a restraining order to take someone's guns away, that's troublesome for folks who appreciate gun rights or support gun rights.
Well, evidently not to the president, who earlier this week said that we should take guns first and have due process later. But let me just say, as somebody who's been critical of Governor Kasich, oftentimes, I think you have to give credit where credit's due, and whatever his motivation for making these proposals, whether it's an actual change of heart or whether it stems from his desire to revamp his image so he can run for president again, whatever the reason, this is a good first step, and I think he deserves credit for it. The problem, as Jackie indicated, is that given the makeup of the legislature, this is not going to pass. Even these modest proposals are not going to pass. And I think it's important for viewers to understand why the NRA, which only has 5 million members in a country of 320 million people, continues to exercise influence out of all proportion to its membership. And the reason is, it's not just campaign contributions. It's that they can mobilize an army of single-issue voters who will cast their ballots solely on that one issue. Unless and until people who feel strongly about gun control, or gun reform, I should say, until they're willing to become single-issue voters too, at least for a cycle or two, nothing's going to change and the NRA will continue to win.
Julia, there's been some polling that shows there are some possible changes there. I think NPR had a poll out today that said 65% of Democrats said there would be a consideration they would have when they go into the polls this fall.
Yes.
Do lawmakers see that?
I do think that there is sort of a start of a sea change happening here. We're seeing these young people from Parkland kind of rise up in a way that hasn't happened in the past. I mean, when we had Newtown, what we had was the parents of small children, which was different than having a young generation of newly 18-year-old voters coming out and picketing and protesting.
To Terry's point, Dale, on the Democratic side, it could be an issue. It is an issue between Richard Cordray and Dennis Kucinich. Cordray does not go as far as banning the AR-15 as Kucinich wants. Is that going to cause problems for Democratic primary voters? Could it cause problems for Cordray if he doesn't go that far?
Yeah, there is a wave. There is a gun reform wave building. Dennis Kucinich is the only candidate on the Democratic side who's in a position to ride that wave. Now, whether he can or not, whether he'll be able to raise the kind of money necessary to do it, I don't know. But the point is, Richard Cordray, who's somebody I've known for a long time, and I don't say this with any great pleasure, but Richard Cordray has an A rating from the NRA. He is unwilling to even have a conversation about banning assault weapons or limiting magazine size. Dennis is. He's making that a major issue in his campaign, and I think it is very possible that that this may be a real horse race.
And Dennis has also stirred the pot on issues like fracking. He wants to ban all fracking in Ohio. So
Mary Taylor and Mike DeWine both criticized Governor Kasich's plan. Of course, they're the candidates for governor on the GOP side. Might their stance come back to haunt them in the general election? It's certainly going to help them in the GOP primary, but when it comes to the general, saying no gun laws, no gun changes at all.
I don't know that it's that big. I mean, the problem, Mary Taylor's got the biggest problem. First of all, her campaign, trying to raise money, trying to get endorsements, she's not doing very well. But on one hand, she wants to brag about how close she is and supported by John Kasich, but then she wants to run from some of these policy things. And I think the other thing, and it might tie into the next topic, people forget John Kasich, in a way, is a politician, but he's as much or more a policy wonk. And so to a certain extent, and it's good that Dale has praised him, he likes to dig into the minutia of some of these issues, and you do need to look at the details.
Why doesn't Mike DeWine say, I support Governor Kasich? He's the clear favorite in the GOP primary. He could say, these are reasonable steps, I support them, but he didn't do that.
Well, there's a lot of debate on how they would really work, and why get too far out front on something when you're not sure how it's going to go in the legislature. Remember, the legislature doesn't have that many weeks of session left. So again, that's why I don't think too much is going to happen. It's good to have the discussions, but nothing's going to happen magically in the next few weeks.
All right.